The Hills Have Eyes 2 isn't just a sequel, it's a bizarre, sun-baked horror hallucination that was buried in the desert for decades. From flashbacking dogs to dirt bike action scenes that feel like they belong in a different movie, this forgotten Craven flick is weirder than you remember. Let's dive into 20 weird, disturbing, and straight-up ridiculous facts about Wes Craven's least favorite film. Fact 1. Wes Craven disowned the film. Wes Craven may have directed it, but he sure didn't stick around to defend it. After wrapping production, he made it clear he wanted nothing to do with it, publicly distancing himself from the project. He only took the job out of financial desperation, following the failure of Swamp Thing and other underperforming scripts, but once A Nightmare on Elm Street made him a household name, Part 2 became the red-headed stepchild of his career. It wasn't screened widely and Craven refused to promote it. He didn't even include it in interviews when talking about his filmography. According to horror insiders, Craven called it a paycheck movie and moved on like it never happened. Fact 2. It was released after A Nightmare on Elm Street. Even though the movie was filmed in 1983, it didn't hit theaters until 1985, after Freddy Krueger had already carved his way into pop culture. The film sat on a shelf for nearly 2 years while the studio debated whether it was even worth finishing. But when A Nightmare on Elm Street exploded in popularity, producers dusted it off and released it in hopes of riding Craven's newfound fame. It was a classic cash grab. But the problem? Fans who expected Craven's brilliance were instead handed a clumsy, half-finished sequel with reused footage and zero scares. The disconnect between expectations and reality couldn't have been wider, and the audience felt it. Fact 3. A dead dog has a flashback. One of the strangest scenes in horror history doesn't involve blood or gore. It involves a German shepherd named Beast. In a moment that defies logic, the dog experiences a full cinematic flashback to the events of the first film. That's right, slow fades, intense score, all from the dog's point of view. It's treated with deadly seriousness, but it's so absurd that audiences erupted in laughter. Critics called it the moment the franchise lost its mind, and it quickly became a cult classic moment for all the wrong reasons. It's like if Cujo paused for a memory montage in the middle of a kill. Pure 80s insanity. Fact 4. Most of the cast were unknowns or stunt people. Instead of hiring seasoned actors, the production went with newcomers and stunt professionals. It wasn't about delivering lines, it was about who could fall off a dirt bike or take a punch without crying. Kevin Spirtas, then credited as Kevin Blair, was brand new to acting. Others had more experience crashing into things than reciting dialogue. The result? Robotic performances and awkward chemistry across the board. But to their credit, the stunt work is solid. Those dirt bike jumps and fight scenes actually hold up better than the acting. It's like watching a motocross team try out for a soap opera. Fact 5. Kevin Spirtas had no idea what he signed up for. When Kevin Spirtas landed the role, he thought he was getting in on a gritty horror action project with Wes Craven. What he didn't realize was that it was a sequel to a brutal 1977 cannibal film, and that he'd be spending most of his scenes dodging mutants and riding dirt bikes. According to later interviews, Spirtas didn't even watch the first movie before filming began. He said the whole experience felt like summer camp gone wrong, with the script changing daily and no one quite sure what tone they were aiming for. Still, it kick-started his horror career. He'd later star in Friday the 13th Part 7 and become a genre regular. Fact 6. Papa Jupiter was supposed to return. Early drafts of the script included the return of Papa Jupiter, the grotesque patriarch of the cannibal family from the original film. There were even ideas floating around to bring him back with a supernatural twist, resurrected by nuclear mutation or desert legend. But when the budget got slashed, so did the character. Instead, we got the Reaper, Pluto's brother, who has no dialogue, no real backstory, and no reason to exist beyond being huge and angry. It was a missed opportunity that could have added real continuity to the sequel, but ended up giving us a silent monster with a sledgehammer and no mess. Fact 7. It was supposed to be a motorcycle racing movie. This wasn't originally pitched as a horror movie at all, it was a motocross action flick. Craven wanted to blend horror with extreme sports, thinking that a group of racers getting stranded in the desert would be the perfect setup for mayhem. That's why the cast is wearing biker gear and half the film is filled with dirt bike stunts. But somewhere along the way, the horror element took over. The mashup didn't quite work, and the final product feels like two movies stitched together, one trying to be rad, the other trying to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Neither wins. Fact 8. Pluto dies in a ridiculously slapstick way. Michael Berryman's Pluto is one of horror's most memorable villains. But his death in part 2 is anything but legendary. He's taken out by a dirt bike in a sequence that looks like it was directed by the Looney Tunes team. He gets hit, flips through the air in slow motion, and crashes into a pile of debris with comically exaggerated flailing. It's so over the top that it undermines everything terrifying about his character. Fans of the original were left scratching their heads, wondering how one of horror's great mutants got such a ridiculous send-off. It's not a kill, it's a punchline. Fact 9. Michael Berryman regretted coming back. Michael Berryman returned to the role of Pluto out of loyalty to Craven, but he didn't walk away happy. He later admitted the production was disorganized, the script weak, and the direction inconsistent. Scenes were rewritten on set, costumes didn't fit, and Berryman was frustrated with how much of the character's menace was lost in translation. Despite giving it his all, he felt the role had become a caricature. He didn't even attend the premiere. Today, he laughs about it with fans, but it's clear he views part 2 as a misstep in an otherwise iconic horror career. Fact 10. Tamara Stafford was nearly blinded during filming. Tamara Stafford, who played Cass, the blind character in the film, had to wear custom contact lenses to give her eyes a cloudy appearance. But these weren't the safe FDA-approved contacts you see today. These were early, thick, and incredibly painful. During a windy desert shoot, sand got trapped behind one of the lenses, scraping her cornea. Production had to halt as she was taken off set for emergency treatment. She later said it was the scariest moment of the whole movie, being unable to see and in pain, surrounded by crew in mutant costumes. Somehow, she returned and finished the shoot, which gives her performance way more grit than you'd expect. Fact 11. The Reaper was played by a 7-foot bodybuilder. Standing over 7 feet tall, John Bloom brought some serious physical intimidation to the role of the Reaper. But what he wasn't given? A character. He had no lines, no motivation, and no direction beyond look scary. Bloom, who'd played Frankenstein in a TV movie years earlier, was used to heavy prosthetics, but the desert heat made things brutal. His costume had no ventilation, and the production couldn't afford a proper cooling system. At one point, he fainted mid-scene and had to be revived with cold water. The Reaper may not say much on screen, but behind the scenes, Bloom was suffering in silence. Fact 12. The movie reuses entire scenes from part 1. In an extreme example of cost-cutting, the film doesn't just reference the first movie, it borrows entire scenes from it. The opening 10 minutes are essentially a highlight reel from The Hills Have Eyes, 1977, complete with recycled Beast footage and flashbacks from characters who didn't survive. The editing barely tries to disguise it, often fading awkwardly from grainy old footage to new scenes. Viewers at the time were baffled. Some thought they'd rented the wrong movie. It gave the sequel an identity crisis and made it feel more like a clip show than a continuation of the story. Fact 13. Crew members fainted from the desert heat. Filming in the Mojave Desert sounds dramatic. And it was. Temperatures soared past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and the crew was woefully underprepared. Multiple people collapsed from heat exhaustion, and actors had to perform while sweating through heavy gear. There were reports of equipment overheating, costumes sticking to skin, and water trucks running out midday. One assistant director reportedly quit halfway through the shoot after fainting twice. Craven, already checked out emotionally, left most of the daily struggles to the crew, many of whom were working their first feature film. It wasn't just grueling, it was borderline dangerous. Fact 14. The original writer was fired mid-script. Part 2 didn't start as Craven's baby. The initial screenplay was penned by another writer who envisioned a more psychological, post-traumatic horror film involving the surviving characters. But as the studio pushed for more action, more blood, and more stunts, that writer was tossed aside, and Craven was pulled in last minute to rewrite. He later admitted he was juggling other projects at the time and wrote large sections half awake at his kitchen table. This explains the film's disjointed tone, one half trying to be thoughtful, the other desperately chasing the slasher craze. The seams are visible, and the plot suffers. Fact 15. Tamara Stafford was almost cast in another Craven project. Despite the chaos of Part 2, Wes Craven saw promise in Tamara Stafford. After filming Wrapped, he briefly considered her for a role in Deadly Friend, 1986, his underrated sci-fi horror flick. While she didn't land the part, it shows Craven still recognized talent even when the final product didn't shine. Stafford faded from the mainstream after this movie, but horror fans still recognize her from Part 2, especially at conventions, where she often shares stories about the grueling shoot, the dangerous contacts, and the moment she realized she'd become part of one of horror's strangest sequels. Fact 16. Actors were told to improvise the horror. Due to constant script changes and a rushed production schedule, several actors were reportedly told to just improvise the horror, as in make up lines, reactions, and even fight choreography on the spot. Many scenes were shot without full rehearsals or finalized scripts. Kevin Spirtas later recalled that some chase sequences were directed with vague instructions like, run that way and scream if you see something. Tamara Stafford was told to just feel your way through scenes, even though she was playing a blind character and couldn't see most of the set. This chaotic, off-the-cuff approach explains why so many moments feel oddly paced or strangely acted. It's not just bad acting, it's unscripted survival. Fact 17. Michael Berryman got injured during filming. While filming one of Pluto's fight scenes, Michael Berryman fell backward into a rusted-out prop and cracked 2 ribs. Production begged him to rest, but he showed up on set the next morning, ribs wrapped and face stoic. When asked why, he simply said, "If Beast can flash back, I can finish this movie." That kind of commitment is part of what's made Berryman a horror icon. He didn't just survive the desert, he owned it, pain and all. He later joked that his real horror was signing the contract without reading the script. Fact 18. It killed the franchise for 22 years. After Part 2 flopped, the entire franchise went silent. No new films, no spin-offs, not even comics or tie-in novels. It wasn't until 2006 that the series was resurrected by Alexandre Aja's brutal, bloody remake. That 22-year gap is one of the longest dormancies for a horror franchise, and it all traces back to Part 2's failure. The movie became so toxic that studios refused to even consider a follow-up. In a way, Part 2 became the horror version of a cursed relic. No one wanted to touch it, and those who did lived to regret it. Fact 19. It's now loved for all the wrong reasons. Despite everything, or maybe because of it, Part 2 has become a cult classic, not for its scares or story, but for how hilariously bad it is. Horror fans host midnight screenings where they cheer for the dog flashback and laugh during every slow-motion dirt bike stunt. It's the kind of movie you force your friends to watch just to see their reaction. In the pantheon of so bad it's good horror, Part 2 is a crown jewel. It didn't succeed at being scary, but it did succeed at being unforgettable. Fact 20. It's a time capsule of 80s horror gone wrong. From the feathered hair to the neon motocross suits to the awkward freeze frames, Part 2 is a museum piece of 1980s horror excess. It tried to tap into everything popular at the time: mutants, action sports, slasher tropes, and wound up with a Frankenstein's monster of missed opportunities. But that's what makes it so fascinating. It's not just a sequel, it's a snapshot of a genre in transition, and of a director trying to escape a paycheck gig while dreaming of Freddy Krueger. It's weird, it's bad, and it's worth every minute.
Garbage child!
If you made it through all 20 facts, congrats! You've survived a journey stranger than the movie itself. Smash that like button, drop your favorite so bad it's good horror sequel in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into the dark corners of cult cinema. And remember, if your dog starts having flashbacks, it's already too late.